The Amish are masters when it comes to stockpiling foods, and their centuries-old wisdom could totally transform the way you think about your pantry. From simple salt to surprising spices that actually get better with age, these 20 foods can outlast your smartphone, your car, and maybe even your mortgage. Let's dive right into honey, the eternal survivor of the food world. When archaeologists popped open some ancient Egyptian tombs, they found something wild: pots of honey that were still good to eat after thousands of years. Makes those best buy dates on our grocery store honey look a bit silly, doesn't it? You might wonder what makes honey such a food superhero. Think of it like this. Bacteria needs water to grow, but honey's got so little water and so much sugar that bacteria takes one look and says, "No thanks, I'll find somewhere else to live." It's like trying to set up camp in the middle of a desert. Not going to happen. And honey's got its own natural preservatives too, just to make extra sure nothing can mess with it. The Amish caught on to honey's superpowers generations ago. In their communities, honey isn't just for tea, though they use plenty of it there. They stir it into bread dough, slather it on sore throats, and even mix it into homemade lotions. Pretty clever, right? While we're running to the store for different ingredients, they're reaching for honey to solve all sorts of problems. But here's the thing. Even Superman has his kryptonite, and honey's weakness is heat. Leave your honey jar somewhere warm and you'll end up with a mess that looks like your kid's failed science experiment. Keep it cool and dark instead, and it'll stay perfect longer than those gift cards you forgot about in your drawer. Here's a fun tip. If your honey gets all grainy and solid, fancy folks call this crystallizing, don't throw it out. Just put the jar in some warm water for a bit, and it'll go right back to normal. It's like giving your honey a spa day. It comes out looking good as new. Now, if honey can last for thousands of years without any fancy technology, wait until you hear about what happens when you let the sun do the work with fruit. Forget everything you know about those sugary store-bought raisins. The Amish have been turning fresh fruit into nature's candy long before fancy food dehydrators hit the market, and they don't need any extra sugar or weird preservatives to have the best dried fruit. Picture having a bumper crop of apples, peaches, or berries that'll go bad in a week. Instead of watching them turn into a science experiment in your fridge, you can do what the Amish have done for generations. Let the sun work its magic. They lay out sliced fruit on wooden racks or clean screens, nothing fancy here, and let Mother Nature do the heavy lifting. The sun slowly pulls out all the water, leaving behind intensified flavors that'll make your taste buds do a happy dance. Here's what's really cool. Dried fruit keeps most of its nutrients locked in tight, like a natural vitamin pill that actually tastes good. The Amish usually start with apples. They turn into these amazing chewy rings. Apricots, nature's candy, seriously, and berries, better than any store-bought snack. Even pears and plums get in on the action, turning into sweet little flavor bombs that can last through those long winter months. But there's a trick to getting it right. You want your fruit thoroughly dried. We're talking leather wallet dry, not just slightly wrinkled. Any moisture left hanging around is like putting out a welcome mat for mold, and nobody wants that party crasher in their pantry. Once it's properly dried, store it somewhere cool and dark. Think basement vibes, not windowsill sunshine, and it'll stay good longer than those limited edition snacks collecting dust in your cupboard. The best part? Dried fruit doesn't need a fancy security system like your smartphone. No refrigeration, no preservatives, no problem. Just pop it in an airtight container, and you've got sweet, healthy snacks that'll last months. If you can resist eating them all at once, that is. Speaking of preserving food, while honey and sun-dried fruit are nature's preservers, there's another kitchen superhero that's been keeping food fresh since before electricity was even a thing. Good old salt. People have been using this mineral marvel since before anyone could write down recipes, and guess what? It hasn't changed its job description one bit since then. Let's get real about salt for a minute. While we're sprinkling it on our fries, the Amish are using it to keep their pantry stocked year-round. They know something most of us forgot. Salt isn't just for seasoning, it's basically food's bodyguard. When you cover meat or vegetables in salt, you're telling bacteria, sorry, this spot's taken. It's like putting up a no vacancy sign for all the stuff that makes food go bad. Now here's where it gets interesting. For every pound of meat you want to preserve, you need about a half cup of salt. Too little salt, and you're basically inviting trouble over for dinner. Too much, and you'll be drinking water like a camel in the desert when you finally eat it. The Amish have got this balance down to an art form. They can preserve everything from pork to green beans, and it'll last longer than your New Year's resolutions. The best part about salt? It's like that friend who never lets you down. It doesn't go bad, doesn't need special storage. Just keep it dry. It's not a fan of swimming. And it's probably cheaper than that fancy coffee you bought this morning. The Amish store it in wooden or ceramic containers, keeping it away from moisture like it's their job. Because it kind of is. And here's a little secret. The Amish don't just use any old salt. They prefer what we call canning and pickling salt because it's pure sodium chloride. No additives invited to this party. Those anti-caking agents in table salt, they can make your preserved foods look like they're auditioning for a horror movie, turning the brine cloudy and sometimes even changing the color of your vegetables. You know what goes great with salt in the preservation game? Those dried beans sitting in your pantry, probably wondering when their time to shine will come. While honey stays sweet forever and salt keeps things fresh, beans are over here playing the long game too. The Amish have known this secret for generations. These little powerhouses can last pretty much forever, and they pack enough protein to give meat a run for its money. Get this. People have actually found dried beans in old Amish homesteads that were still good after half a century. That's right. Beans that are older than most people's parents were still ready to jump into a pot of soup. Makes those expired beans in your cabinet seem pretty young, doesn't it? The Amish don't mess around when it comes to storing these protein-packed pebbles. They keep them in airtight containers somewhere cool and dry, basically giving them the 5-star hotel treatment without the fancy price tag. No need for your fridge to get involved. These hardy little guys are perfectly happy chilling at room temperature. Here's where beans really shine, though. They're like the Transformers of the food world. One day they're sitting in your pantry, hard as rocks, looking about as appetizing as garden pebbles. But give them an overnight soak in some water and bam! They turn into these plump, tender morsels that can take on any flavor you throw at them. It's like the ultimate food makeover. No fancy equipment required. The Amish have a saying that a pantry without beans is like a winter without a coat. You might survive, but why make life harder than it needs to be? They'll toss these protein bombs into soups, stews, salads, or just cook them up with some salt pork for a meal that'll keep you going through a day of barn raising. And if beans are the marathon runners of your pantry, then their best training partner is sitting right next to them. Rice, the food that's been feeding the world since before anyone can remember. The Amish stock this stuff like they're preparing for a world-class buffet that never ends. Why? Because rice is basically the cockroach of the food world. And I mean that as a compliment. It just won't quit. Here's something that'll blow your mind. Properly stored white rice can hang out in your pantry for over 25 years. That's right, your rice could be older than your kid's first car and still be ready to jump into a pot of boiling water. While we're all checking expiration dates on our fancy instant meals, rice is just chilling in its container, laughing at the concept of time. The Amish keep it simple with rice storage. Sealed containers, cool spot, no moisture allowed at the party. It's like giving rice its own little fortress of solitude. They don't need any of those fancy vacuum-sealed bags or special containers that cost more than your weekly grocery bill. Just a basic airtight container and a dry spot is all it takes. What makes rice the ultimate survivor? It's all about being boring, in a good way. White rice is like that friend who never starts drama. No oils to go rancid, no moisture to invite mold, just pure, simple carbohydrates living their best life. Brown rice tries to be all fancy with its extra nutrients, but those same nutrients make it spoil faster. Sometimes basic is better. The Amish use rice as their culinary Swiss Army knife. Having beans for dinner, rice jumps in to make it a meal. Leftover chicken, rice turns it into a feast. Got some garden vegetables? Rice says, throw them in. It's like the ultimate team player in your pantry, ready to bulk up any meal without stealing the show. Speaking of things that make everything better, there's another white crystal besides salt that's been sweetening the deal since ancient times: good old sugar. Here's the deal with sugar. It's like the immortal vampire of your pantry, except it actually shows up in mirrors and doesn't mind garlic. The Amish have been stocking this sweet stuff since forever, knowing it'll last longer than most family feuds. And get this, sugar used to be so valuable that people actually used it as money. Imagine paying your bills with a bag of sugar today. Sorry, landlord, would you accept this 5-pound bag of sweetness as rent? The Amish don't just keep sugar around for their morning coffee, though they do love their sweets. It's their secret weapon for preserving just about every fruit that grows in their gardens. Got too many strawberries? Sugar 'em. Peaches going soft? Sugar to the rescue. It's like having a preservation superhero that also makes everything taste better. Talk about a win-win. But here's where it gets really interesting. Sugar doesn't just preserve food, it preserves itself. You could store sugar in your great-grandmother's old ceramic jar, and as long as you keep it dry, it'll be just as sweet when your great-grandkids find it. No expiration date needed. Sugar's in it for the long haul. The only thing that can mess with sugar is moisture, which turns it into a rock-solid brick that'll have you chiseling away like an archaeologist. The Amish keep their sugar in airtight containers in a cool, dry place, basically giving it the same 5-star treatment as rice. No fancy equipment, no special containers, just good old-fashioned common sense. And unlike those fancy organic, non-GMO, triple-filtered sweeteners that cost an arm and a leg, regular sugar just sits there being perfect forever. Now, if sugar's the sweet preservation king, wait until you hear about its whole grain cousin that's been feeding civilizations since before writing was invented. Wheat berries. These little kernels are like time capsules with an attitude. They've been found in Egyptian tombs, still ready to sprout after thousands of years. Try getting that kind of longevity from your breakfast cereal. The Amish look at wheat berries the way most of us look at our smartphones. They just can't imagine life without them. And for good reason. These little powerhouses are basically an entire grocery store packed into tiny kernels. They're the original whole grain before marketing teams got hold of the term and slapped it on every box in the cereal aisle. Here's what makes wheat berries the ultimate survival food. They're like the Russian nesting dolls of nutrition. Crack one open and you'll find layers of goodness. Fiber, protein, vitamins, and minerals, all wrapped up in a natural package that could outlast your mortgage. The Amish grind these babies into fresh flour whenever they need it, which means their bread has more nutrients than those sad processed loaves taking up space in your grocery store. But storing wheat berries isn't like keeping your other pantry staples fresh. Think of them as the divas of the grain world. They've got some specific demands. First, they need their beauty sleep in a cool, dark place. Then, they insist on having their own airtight container, plastic, metal, or glass. They're not picky about the material, just the seal. And whatever you do, don't let them catch even a whiff of moisture. One drop of water, and you might as well be inviting mold to host a block party in your storage room. The Amish have this storage thing down to an art form. They keep their wheat berries in large food-grade buckets, often with oxygen absorbers thrown in for good measure. It's like creating a 5-star hotel for grains, minus the room service. And here's the kicker. When stored properly, wheat berries will stay fresh for decades. Your grandkids could be making bread from the same batch of wheat berries you bought today. Want to try this yourself? Start small with a few pounds of wheat berries in airtight containers. Keep them somewhere cool and dry. Think basement, not bathroom. And make sure your containers are food grade. Those old paint buckets aren't going to cut it. Add some oxygen absorbers if you're feeling fancy, and boom, you've got yourself a supply of food that could feed your family through thick and thin. But what good is bread without something tangy to pair it with? That's where our next preservation superstar comes in. Apple cider vinegar, the sour sensation that's been keeping foods fresh since before refrigerators were even a dream. Apple cider vinegar, or as the Amish call it, their liquid problem solver. While other vinegars are out there playing second fiddle, ACV is like the rock star of fermented foods. It doesn't just preserve stuff. It's got more uses than your grandmother's favorite casserole dish. The Amish don't just keep apple cider vinegar around because they like the taste of sour apples, though that tangy kick is pretty awesome. They stock it because it's practically immortal. Think about it. It's already fermented, which means it basically came pre-spoiled on purpose. It's like the Benjamin Button of pantry items. It just gets better with age instead of worse. You know those miracle cure ads that promise to fix everything from bad hair to bad luck? Well, apple cider vinegar might not fix your luck, but the Amish use it for just about everything else. Got vegetables that need pickling? A CV's got your back. Kitchen counter looking grimy? A CV to the rescue. Feeling under the weather? The Amish might tell you to take a spoonful, though you might want to chase it with some of that eternal honey we talked about earlier. Here's the really wild part. Apple cider vinegar is like that friend who never needs babysitting. Store it in a cool, dark place, and it'll stay good longer than most marriages. No need for refrigeration, no special containers required. Just keep the cap on because nobody likes vinegar-scented closets, and you're good to go. The Amish keep their ACV in glass bottles or ceramic crocks, treating it with the respect a centuries-old preservation method deserves. But fair warning, not all apple cider vinegar is created equal. The Amish make theirs the old-school way, complete with the mother, that cloudy stuff floating around that looks like something went wrong but is actually everything going right. It's like the sourdough starter of the vinegar world, full of good bacteria and ready to work its magic on whatever crosses its path. Now, if you thought apple cider vinegar was versatile, wait until you hear about how the Amish turn humble tomatoes into their own version of sunshine in a can. While most of us are out here paying premium prices for those fancy store-bought canned tomatoes, the Amish are sitting on their porches, turning their summer harvest into year-round happiness. It's like they figured out how to trap August in a jar. Now, you might be thinking, they're just tomatoes, what's the big deal? But in an Amish kitchen, canned tomatoes are like the Swiss Army knife of ingredients. They're ready for anything. Soup's having an identity crisis? Throw in some canned tomatoes. Stew looking a bit sad? Canned tomatoes to the rescue. Need a quick sauce for dinner? You guessed it, those jarred red beauties are about to save your meal faster than you can say fast food. Here's what makes the Amish approach to tomato canning so brilliant. They don't waste a single sun-ripened tomato. When summer hits its peak and tomato plants are practically throwing their fruit at you, the Amish turn their kitchens into preservation central. Every tomato that's not getting eaten fresh is destined for a jar. It's like they're running a tomato witness protection program, protecting them from the harsh reality of winter by giving them a new life in mason jars. But let's talk science for a second. Don't worry, we'll keep it simple. Tomatoes are like little vitamin bombs packed with stuff your body loves, vitamins A and C, plus lycopene, which actually gets stronger when tomatoes are canned. That's right, these aren't just convenient, they're actually getting more nutritious while they sit there. It's like they're working out in those jars, getting stronger while they wait for you to need them. The Amish have this whole process down to an art form. They pick their tomatoes at peak ripeness. We're talking that perfect moment when they're red enough to make a fire truck jealous. Then they carefully wash and prep them, sometimes leaving them whole, other times dicing them up, because who knows what future you is going to need. Into clean jars they go with just the right amount of lemon juice to keep things safe and tasty. The whole process is like a choreographed dance that's been passed down through generations. Storage is where things get serious. The Amish keep their tomato treasure trove in cool, dark places, usually in a cellar or pantry that stays at a steady temperature. Properly stored, these jars of summer sunshine can last 3 to 5 years, though good luck keeping them around that long. They're usually too tasty to last past winter. Speaking of winter comfort foods, let's talk about something else the Amish have mastered, turning simple ground corn into a versatile pantry powerhouse that'll last practically forever. You might think cornmeal is just that yellow stuff sitting in the back of your pantry waiting for its annual cornbread appearance, but in an Amish kitchen, it's the MVP of long-lasting ingredients. While we're all chasing the latest food trends, the Amish are sticking with this ancient grain that's been feeding folks since Native Americans first figured out how to grind corn into something magical. Get this. Properly stored cornmeal can last decades. That's right, the cornmeal in your Amish neighbor's pantry might be older than their youngest child, and it's still ready to jump into action. While your fancy organic quinoa is getting buggy after 6 months, cornmeal's just chilling in its container, laughing at father time. It's like the Betty White of pantry ingredients. Age just makes it more impressive. The Amish don't mess around when it comes to storing this golden powder. They keep it in airtight containers. We're talking sealed better than your cousin's secret recipe collection. Glass jars, food-grade buckets, even those fancy vacuum-sealed bags if they're feeling modern. The key is keeping it bone-dry and cool. Kind of like how you'd treat a valuable antique, except this antique can feed your family for months. But here's where cornmeal really shines. It's like the chameleon of the food world. The Amish use it for everything from breakfast to dinner, and sometimes even dessert. Morning cornmeal mush? Check. Crispy coating for fried chicken? You bet. The best cornbread this side of heaven? That's cornmeal's middle name. It's even the secret to getting that perfect crispy bottom on their homemade pizza. Bet you didn't see that one coming. There's some real history behind this humble ingredient, too. Native Americans were grinding corn long before Columbus got lost at sea. And when European settlers arrived, it didn't take them long to figure out this was something special. The Amish, with their focus on simple, sustainable living, took one look at cornmeal and said, "Now that's what we're talking about." It's been a staple in their pantries ever since. Want to know the real secret to cornmeal's longevity? It's all about the grind. The Amish often prefer stone-ground cornmeal, which keeps more of the corn's natural oils but needs to be used faster. For long-term storage, they go for degerminated cornmeal. It's like cornmeal that's been through boot camp, stripped down to just the hearty parts that can last forever. Less nutritious? Maybe. But when you're planning for the long haul, sometimes you've got to make tough choices. Now, if you think cornmeal is impressive, wait until you hear about how the Amish have mastered the art of preserving meat without a single volt of electricity. Let's talk about their secret to keeping protein fresh for months. While we're all paranoid about leaving chicken out for more than 2 hours, they're casually pulling year-old canned beef from their pantry shelves like it's no big deal. Let's get something straight. We're not talking about those sad little cans of mystery meat from the grocery store. The Amish approach to canning meat is more like capturing lightning in a jar, except instead of lightning, it's perfectly preserved portions of beef, chicken, and pork. Each jar is like a time capsule of freshness, ready to jump into your next meal faster than you can say, fast food drive-through. Here's what makes this whole process mind-blowing. Properly canned meat can last 3 to 5 years on the shelf. That's right. While you're doing the weekly shuffle of freezer Tetris with your meat purchases, the Amish are sitting pretty with their pantry protein that doesn't need a speck of electricity to stay fresh. It's like they've discovered some kind of food preservation magic, except it's all science and generations of know-how. The Amish don't just can any old meat, though. They're pickier than a toddler at a vegetable buffet when it comes to choosing what goes in those jars. The meat has to be fresh. We're talking the chicken was clucking this morning fresh. They cut it into perfect portions because nobody wants to deal with a whole chicken in a jar. Pack it raw into spotlessly clean jars, and then pressure can it until it's cooked and sealed tight as a drum. But here's where it gets really interesting. Canned meat isn't just safe to eat, it's actually fall-apart tender. The pressure canning process turns even tough cuts of beef into something that melts in your mouth. It's like having a slow cooker running for hours, except all the work was done months ago. The Amish will tell you there's nothing better than opening a jar of home-canned chicken for a quick soup or turning that preserved beef into a pot pie that'll make your grandmother jealous. Storage is serious business, though. These jars of meaty goodness need a cool, dark place to hang out. Think root cellar vibes, not sunny windowsill display. The Amish check their seals religiously, no pun intended, because one bad seal can turn your preserved protein into a science experiment gone wrong. But get it right, and you've got yourself a pantry full of ready-to-eat meat that laughs in the face of power outages. Living without a refrigerator might sound like a dairy lover's nightmare, but the Amish have a secret weapon in their pantry arsenal: powdered milk. While most of us only think about this stuff when we're running low on fresh milk or planning a camping trip, the Amish see it as their insurance policy against dairy emergencies. It's like having a cow in your cupboard, minus all the mooing and feeding. Here's something that'll blow your mind. Properly stored powdered milk can last up to 20 years. That's right. While you're sniffing that carton of fresh milk wondering if it's still good after a week, powdered milk is sitting in an Amish pantry laughing at the concept of expiration dates. It's got a longer shelf life than most people's mortgages, and unlike that fancy organic milk that costs more than your morning coffee habit, powdered milk just sits there, ready to transform into liquid gold whenever you need it. The Amish don't just keep powdered milk around for their morning coffee or cereal emergencies, though it's great for both. They're like kitchen chemists, using it for everything from baking to making homemade yogurt. Need to enrich your bread dough? Powdered milk. Want to make creamy soups without the cream? Powdered milk to the rescue. It's like having a dairy Swiss Army knife in your pantry, ready to tackle any culinary challenge that comes its way. But storing this miracle powder isn't as simple as throwing the box in your cupboard and hoping for the best. The Amish treat their powdered milk storage like a fine art. First, they transfer it to airtight containers. We're talking sealed tighter than your great aunt's secret recipe box, glass jars, food-grade buckets, or even Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers if they're feeling fancy. The goal is to keep out moisture, light, and air. Basically, everything that could turn your powdered insurance policy into a dairy disaster. Temperature matters too. The Amish keep their powdered milk in cool, dark places. Think basement vibes, not next to the stove. Every degree above 70 degrees Fahrenheit is like adding a tiny bit of age to your powder. Store it right, though, and this stuff will be ready to reconstitute long after you've forgotten when you bought it. It's like having a time machine for milk, minus the sci-fi special effects. Here's a pro tip straight from Amish kitchens. Mix your powdered milk with cold water and let it chill overnight. It's like giving it a spa day. The proteins have time to properly hydrate, and the result tastes way better than that hastily mixed glass you tried at summer camp. Some Amish families even mix it half and half with fresh milk to stretch their dairy dollars without sacrificing taste. But if you think powdered milk is impressive, wait until you hear about how the Amish turned fresh meat into a portable, long-lasting protein powerhouse that puts modern energy bars to shame. Forget those overpriced, overprocessed strips of mystery meat at the gas station. Let's talk about real jerky, Amish style. While the rest of us are paying premium prices for tiny bags of commercial jerky that taste like seasoned rubber, the Amish are turning fresh meat into protein-packed snacks that could outlast your next camping trip, and probably taste better too. The Amish don't just stick to beef jerky either. They're equal opportunity dehydrators. Venison from last hunting season? Perfect for jerky. Got some extra turkey? Into the jerky pile it goes. Even fish gets the jerky treatment sometimes. It's like they're running a gourmet dried meat boutique, except everything's actually affordable and made with ingredients you can pronounce. Here's what makes Amish jerky special. It's not just about drying meat, it's about preserving tradition. Each family usually has their own secret blend of seasonings passed down through generations like a treasured family heirloom. Some swear by a simple salt and pepper combo, while others mix in everything from garlic to maple syrup. And unlike that store-bought stuff with enough sodium to make a cardiologist cry, Amish jerky lets the meat's natural flavor shine through. The process is like a perfectly choreographed dance that's been refined over centuries. First, they choose lean cuts of meat. Fat is jerky's worst enemy since it can go rancid. They slice it thin enough to dry properly, but thick enough to give you something to chew on. It's a delicate balance, kind of like trying to keep peace at a family reunion. The meat gets marinated in their secret spice blend, then dried slowly until it's got that perfect chewy but not break your teeth texture. Storage is where the Amish really shine. Their jerky can last for months, sometimes even years, without refrigeration. The secret? Getting the moisture content just right. Too wet, and you're inviting bacteria to party. Too dry, and you've got leather instead of jerky. They store it in airtight containers or vacuum-sealed bags, kept in cool, dark places. Some families even wrap their jerky in brown paper first, claiming it helps prevent any leftover moisture from causing problems. But here's the real genius of jerky. It's basically nature's original energy bar. High in protein, lightweight, and ready to eat without any preparation. The Amish pack it for long days in the field. Slip it into children's lunch pails, or just keep it handy for when hunger strikes. It's like having a piece of steak in your pocket, minus the mess and weird looks from strangers. Speaking of breakfast-worthy protein, there's another long-lasting staple that's been filling Amish breakfast bowls since before cereal companies started adding cartoon mascots to their boxes. Let's talk about how oats became the ultimate morning survival food. While we're all chasing the latest breakfast trends and paying premium prices for fancy granola, the Amish are sitting on a goldmine of grain that could outlast your favorite social media platform. Get this, properly stored oats can literally last for decades. We're talking 20 to 30 years of breakfast potential just chilling in your pantry. That's longer than most people keep their cars. While your expensive cereals are going stale faster than last week's gossip, oats are just getting comfortable in their storage containers, ready to feed generations to come. It's like they've discovered the fountain of youth. Except instead of eternal life, you get eternal breakfast. The Amish approach to storing oats is like creating a 5-star hotel for grain. They transfer them to airtight containers, and we're not talking about those flimsy plastic things from the dollar store. We're talking heavy-duty, food-grade buckets. Glass jars sealed tighter than your grandmother's secret recipe vault, or even Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers if they're feeling particularly protective. Moisture is the enemy here. One drop of water and your long-term breakfast plans could turn into a science experiment gone wrong. But here's where oats really shine. They're like the chameleon of the grain world. Sure, you can make your basic oatmeal, though the Amish version, cooked slow with a pinch of salt and a drizzle of that eternal honey we talked about earlier, might change your life. But that's just the beginning. The Amish use oats in everything from bread, where it adds this amazing texture, to cookies that'll make you forget about those store-bought ones. They even feed them to livestock because apparently humans aren't the only ones who appreciate a good bowl of oats. The nutritional staying power of oats is what really makes the Amish stock up like they're preparing for a breakfast apocalypse. These little grains are packed with fiber, protein, and something called beta-glucan that apparently makes your heart do a happy dance. And unlike some foods that lose their nutritional mojo over time, oats keep their health benefits longer than most people keep their New Year's resolutions. Here's a pro tip straight from Amish kitchens. Toast your oats before cooking them. It's like sending them to a spa. They come out with this nutty, rich flavor that'll make you wonder why you ever ate them any other way. Some families even grind them into flour for baking, turning ordinary recipes into fiber-rich powerhouses that taste way better than those healthy alternatives at the store. But if you think oats are impressive, wait until you hear about how the Amish turned summer's bounty into winter's comfort food. Let's talk about their approach to canned fruit. Think those store-bought canned peaches are good? That's cute. The Amish turned summer fruit into jars of sunshine that'll make your grocery store finds taste like they came from a cardboard orchard. While we're all scrambling to eat our fresh fruit before it goes bad, they're capturing peak season sweetness in jars that'll bring August flavors to your December dinner table. Here's something that'll make you rethink your fruit storage game. Properly canned fruit can last up to 5 years. That's right, while you're tossing mushy bananas into the compost, the Amish are pulling out peaches from 2019 that taste like they were picked yesterday. It's like they've got a time machine in their pantry, except instead of visiting the past, they're bringing the best parts of summer right into the middle of winter. The Amish don't just can any old fruit that falls off the tree. They're like fruit whisperers, waiting for that perfect moment when each piece is ripe enough to make your taste buds sing, but firm enough to hold up during canning. Peaches, pears, cherries, plums. If it grows in their orchards, they've figured out how to put it in a jar. And don't even get me started on their applesauce. It's like they've captured the essence of autumn in every batch. But here's where the real magic happens. They're canning syrup. While commercial canneries dump enough sugar in their fruit to make a dentist weep, the Amish take a more subtle approach. They use just enough sweetness to enhance the fruit's natural flavor, not bury it. Some families even use honey instead of sugar, creating preserves that would make your great-grandmother's prize-winning recipes jealous. Storage is where things get serious. Each jar is treated like a precious gem, stored in cool, dark places where temperature stays as steady as an Amish horse at a county fair. The Amish check their seals more often than most people check their phone notifications because one bad seal can turn your winter treat into a science experiment gone wrong. But get it right, and you've got yourself a pantry full of fruit that's ready to jump into pies, cobblers, or just straight into a bowl for a taste of summer anytime you want it. The really clever part? The Amish have turned canning fruit into a community event. When the peaches are ready, everybody shows up with their jars and their helping hands. It's like a party where the party favors last for years. Kids learn from their parents, neighbors share tips and tricks, and somehow the work feels less like work when you're doing it together. But if you think preserved fruit is impressive, wait until you see what happens when the Amish get their hands on vegetables. While most of us think pickling is just for cucumbers and the occasional onion, the Amish approach is more like, if it grows in the garden, we can pickle it. They're basically the mad scientists of the preserving world, except their experiments always end in delicious success. Let's bust a myth right here. Pickled vegetables aren't just something you slap on a hamburger. In Amish kitchens, pickled veggies are like the Swiss Army knife of preserved foods. Got a bumper crop of green beans? Pickle them into dilly beans that snap like nature's potato chips. Cauliflower looking a bit lonely? Throw it in a jar with some spices and watch it transform into a crunchy, tangy treat. Even carrots get the pickle treatment, turning into something so good you'll forget they're actually healthy. The real magic isn't just in what they pickle, but how long these preserved gems last. Properly pickled vegetables can hang out in your pantry for years, though good luck keeping them around that long. While your fresh vegetables are turning into a science experiment in the crisper drawer, pickled veggies are just getting cozier in their vinegar bath, developing flavors that'll make your grandmother's recipes seem boring. Here's where the Amish really shine. Their pickling brines are like closely guarded family treasures. Each family has their own special blend of vinegar, salt, and spices passed down through generations like a delicious inheritance. Some swear by apple cider vinegar, remember that immortal stuff we talked about earlier? While others mix different vinegars like they're creating a symphony of sourness. And the spice combinations, that's where things get really interesting. Dill, garlic, and peppercorns are just the beginning. Some families throw in mustard seeds, celery seeds, or even hot peppers that'll clear your sinuses faster than a winter cold. The Amish approach to pickle storage is like creating a fortress for flavor. Cool, dark places are essential. These aren't decorations for your sunny windowsill. They stack their jars like they're building edible architecture, each one labeled with the date and contents, though some of those family recipe names can get pretty creative. Grandma's garden surprise might just be pickled cauliflower, but it sounds way more intriguing. But here's the really clever part. Pickling isn't just about preserving food, it's about preserving flavors. That summer garden crunch, the fresh herb kick, even the bright colors. They all get locked in those jars like time capsules of taste. Open one in the middle of winter, and it's like getting a high five from summer right when you need it most. Speaking of preserving things for the long haul, let's talk about another kitchen superstar that laughs in the face of expiration dates: coconut oil. You might think coconut oil is just another trendy health food fad, but the Amish knew about this miracle worker long before Instagram influencers started putting it in their coffee. In an Amish pantry, coconut oil isn't just a cooking ingredient, it's more like the superhero of the storage world, swooping in to save everything from dry skin to squeaky door hinges. And unlike your other cooking oils that go rancid faster than milk goes sour, coconut oil's got staying power that would make a marathon runner jealous. Here's the kicker. While your fancy olive oil is turning funky after a few months, coconut oil can last for years without going bad. We're talking 2 to 5 years of solid shelf life, and that's being conservative. Some Amish families swear their properly stored coconut oil lasts even longer. It's like the Betty White of oils. It just keeps going strong while everything else shows its age. But what makes this tropical treasure such a storage superstar? It's all about those saturated fats everyone used to be scared of. Turns out they're like little bodyguards that protect the oil from going rancid. While other oils are turning into science experiments in your cupboard, coconut oil just sits there, stable as your grandma's kitchen table, ready for action whenever you need it. The Amish use coconut oil for practically everything. Need to grease a baking pan? Coconut oil. Got a batch of homemade soap in the works? Coconut oil's got you covered. Dealing with a squeaky hinge on your barn door? Yep, coconut oil can handle that too. It's like having a whole hardware store and beauty counter rolled into one jar. Some Amish families even use it as an emergency light source. Just add a wick to some melted coconut oil, and you've got yourself an impromptu candle that smells better than those fancy ones from the mall. Storage is pretty straightforward, but there are some tricks to keeping this versatile oil in prime condition. The Amish keep it in airtight containers. Glass is best. Plastic can get funky over time. In a cool, dark place. Though here's a fun fact that might blow your mind. Coconut oil plays this neat trick where it goes solid below 76 degrees Fahrenheit and liquid above it. It's like having a science experiment in your pantry, except this one's totally intentional and actually useful. But here's the real genius move. Some Amish families divide their coconut oil stash into 2 parts, one for cooking and one for everything else. The cooking stuff stays in the kitchen, while the everything else jar might travel from the workshop to the bathroom to the barn. It's like having a Swiss Army knife in oil form, ready to tackle whatever job comes its way. Now, if you think coconut oil is versatile, wait until you hear about how the Amish use simple tea leaves to create a stockpile of comfort that can last longer than some marriages. Forget those fancy tea shops with their diamond-encrusted tea bags. Let's talk about how the Amish turn simple tea leaves into a stockpile of comfort that could outlast your Netflix subscription. While most of us are wrestling with tangled teabag strings and stale supermarket blends, the Amish have been quietly mastering the art of storing loose tea like it's nature's medicine cabinet, which, in many ways, it is. Here's something that'll make you think twice about those dusty tea bags in your cupboard. Properly stored loose tea can last anywhere from 2 to 5 years, and some varieties can go even longer. That's right, while your coffee beans are going stale faster than last week's gossip, tea leaves are just chilling in their containers, getting more distinguished like a fine wine. The Amish treat their tea storage like they're protecting crown jewels, and for good reason. When the world gets crazy, a good cup of tea can feel like a warm hug for your soul. But don't think the Amish are out here hoarding fancy Earl Greys and exotic blends that cost more than your weekly grocery bill. They're all about those practical, hardworking teas, peppermint from the garden, chamomile for those can't-sleep nights, and good old black tea that'll put hair on your chest, as my grandfather used to say. They grow what they can and carefully source the rest, treating each leaf like it's precious cargo. Storage is where things get serious, and this is where most people go wrong with their tea. The Amish keep their tea in airtight containers away from light, heat, moisture, and strong odors. Because let's face it, nobody wants their chamomile tasting like last week's garlic experiment. Glass jars with tight-fitting lids are the gold standard, though some families swear by ceramic canisters passed down through generations. Each container is labeled with the type of tea and date of storage, organized with the kind of precision that would make a librarian proud. Here's a fun fact that'll make you rethink everything you know about tea. In the 1800s, tea was so valuable that some folks used it as currency. The Amish remember these historical lessons, which is why they treat their tea stash like a savings account for rough times. Need to settle a stomach? There's a tea for that. Fighting a cold? There's a blend for that too. Can't sleep because you're worried about tomorrow? You guessed it. There's a perfect tea waiting in their pantry. The really clever part? The Amish don't just store tea, they store comfort. Each blend has its purpose, its story, its special place in daily life. Morning black tea to get the day started, peppermint for after those big family dinners, chamomile for when the kids, or adults, need settling down. It's like having a pharmacy, a comfort station, and a beverage bar all rolled into one. Let's spill the beans, pun absolutely intended, about how the Amish turn everyday ingredients into jars of liquid gold. We're talking soup that's ready to warm your soul faster than you can say, fast food drive-thru. While most of us are popping open cans of who knows what from the grocery store, the Amish are sitting on a gold mine of homemade soup that could feed an army, or at least get you through winter without ever having to worry what's for dinner. Here's the real game changer. Properly canned soup can last 3 to 5 years on your shelf. That's longer than most people keep their smartphones. While your freezer's playing Tetris with those plastic containers of leftovers, Amish canned soup is chillin', actually room temping, in the pantry, ready to jump into action whenever hunger strikes. It's like having a time capsule of comfort food that's actually edible. The Amish don't just throw random ingredients in a pot and hope for the best. Their soup making is more like edible architecture. Every ingredient has its purpose, every seasoning its place. They start with homemade bone broth. None of that store-bought stuff that tastes like warm salt water. Add vegetables straight from their gardens and throw in beans or meat they've preserved themselves. It's like they're conducting a symphony where every ingredient gets its moment to shine. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Amish treat soup making like a form of preventive medicine. Got a bumper crop of tomatoes? That's going to be tomato soup for when winter colds hit. Chicken broth gets canned by the gallon because everyone knows it's Jewish penicillin's cousin, and the Amish version might give Grandma's recipe a run for its money. Every jar of soup is like a little insurance policy against future hunger, illness, or just those days when cooking feels like climbing Mount Everest. Storage is serious business. These aren't your regular mason jars we're talking about. The Amish pressure can their soups using methods that would make a food safety inspector proud. Each jar is sterilized until it's cleaner than a surgeon's hands, filled with piping hot soup, and sealed tight enough to keep out everything except thoughts of dinner. They store these liquid treasures in cool, dark places, stacked like edible building blocks of brilliance. The really brilliant part? Each jar of soup is like a ready-made meal in disguise. Pop the lid, heat it up, and boom. You've got dinner faster than you can say delivery. Some families even can their soups in meal-sized portions because nothing's worse than having to do math when you're hungry. And unlike those sad cans from the store that taste like they were made in a laboratory, these soups taste like someone's grandmother poured her heart into every jar. But if you think soup is impressive, wait until you hear about the final secret weapon in the Amish preservation arsenal, their magical approach to storing spices that actually get better with age. While most of us are wondering if those ancient spices in our cabinet are still good, the ones you bought during Obama's first term, the Amish are sitting on a spice collection that gets better with age, like a fine wine or your uncle's questionable jokes at family gatherings. Here's something that'll blow your mind. Properly stored whole spices can last up to 4 years, and some, like cinnamon, actually improve with age. That's right, while you're tossing out expired protein bars, those cinnamon sticks are just hitting their stride. The Amish know this secret well, which is why their spice storage game is stronger than your grandmother's coffee. But we're not just talking about the usual suspects here. Sure, they've got your cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves, the holy trinity of holiday baking. But the Amish spice cabinet is like a United Nations of flavors. Peppercorns that could make your nose tingle from across the room, star anise that looks like it fell from a spice galaxy, and cardamom pods that cost more per ounce than some precious metals, but are totally worth it according to every Amish baker ever. The storage system is where things get serious, and this is where most of us go wrong. The Amish keep their spices in airtight glass containers, away from light, heat, and moisture, treating them with the kind of respect usually reserved for family heirlooms. No plastic bags that let in moisture, no cute countertop racks that expose spices to light and heat. We're talking proper storage that would make a museum curator jealous. Here's the really clever part. They buy most of their spices whole and grind them as needed. Those pre-ground spices at the store, they're already losing flavor while sitting on the shelf. But whole spices are like nature's time capsules, keeping their flavors locked up tight until the moment you need them. It's like having a flavor savings account that actually gains interest over time. The Amish use these spices for everything. And I mean everything. That honey we talked about earlier, better with a pinch of cinnamon. Those pickled vegetables, perked up with whole peppercorns and mustard seeds. Even their medicinal teas get a boost from spices that have been warming bellies and fighting cold since before America was a country. But perhaps the most brilliant part of the Amish spice strategy is how they turn ordinary ingredients into extraordinary meals. A pinch of this, a dash of that, and suddenly that simple rice and beans we talked about earlier tastes like it came from a 5-star restaurant. It's like having a magic wand in your kitchen, except instead of saying abracadabra, you're sprinkling cinnamon. And there you have it. 20 tried and true Amish food preservation methods that could probably outlast those forever diamonds they advertise on TV. From honey that's older than 2,000 years your grandparents to spices that improve with age, these techniques aren't just about keeping food fresh. They're about maintaining a connection to the past while preparing for the future. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I hear my century-old honey calling,